And now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. None of you were expecting this. I guarantee it. You were all sat there thinking I was going to round this out by talking about Crisis Core or Kingdom Hearts or Bravely Default or something, but no, we shall not touch upon Grimoire of the Rift or Revenant Wings, and there's no fucking way I'll ever look at any of those Chocobo games. And do you know why? Because I did it my way. Anyway, that's enough of that racket. Shame I'm tone deaf, isn't it? Crystal Chronicles has always been a bit of an odd duck, and it seems that Square has never been quite sure what to do with it. The only thing they've been certain about is publishing them on Nintendo consoles, which has led to quite the odd lineup. First we have Crystal Chronicles, an action RPG for the GameCube, then Ring of Fates comes out on the DS, a handheld with the processing power of a Ouija board, followed by Echoes of Time, which also came out on the DS but bizarrely had a cross-platform release with the Wii, which translated about as well as HSBC's 2009 branding campaign. Look it up! After this, things start to get real weird, as My Life as a King and My Life as a Dark Lord were both released via the WiiWare store, which is at best an odd move and more likely condemn both games to relative obscurity, and whilst I can't speak for the latter, the former would probably deserve it as punishment because of all the microtransaction bullshit it put in. The most perplexing thing is that they both had no resemblance to former titles at all, being a management game and a tower defense respectively. And then we arrive at Crystal Bearers. This game goes further than throwing out the gameplay, throwing out the setting as well, and zooming several hundred years into the future so we can safely forget anything that's happened in the games up to this point, which is nice. Instead, what we're left with is a world with a rich lore that's relatively well explained by the game and a story that's free to do what it wants. Woohoo! There are downsides, so I'll get them out of the way now so that we don't end on a negative. First, the combat is really unusual and fun at first, using gravity powers to throw your enemies at stuff and stuff at them, but I guarantee that it'll fuck up one too many times for you to be able to defend it before you're finished. Ooh, look at that, Wii motion controls not working very well, what a surprise. Second, the game makes you play obnoxious minigames one too many times to get away with it, and finally, the voice acting is at best a mixed bag. Some of the characters just sound goofy, but our lead is voiced with all the blistering emotion of an independent tax accountant filing Form SA 100 with a total of 3 of his lines being said with feeling. But now we've got that out of the way, we come to the plot. For this one I did a total playthrough of the game, thinking that if I wrote about 4 bullets per point I'd have a basis for a couple of hundred words and we'd be done. However, my memory deceived me and I ended up with 11 goddamn pages of bullet points to flesh out, so without further ado, the plot of FFCC. Our story opens with a shot of the lilty tribal crystal hovering over an airship graveyard. Inside one of the airships we see a man who has been turned to solid jam, then an overdressed woman comes and identifies him as her father before reaching out to touch him, whereupon her funky necklace goes whoosh and she falls over to have a small weep. With a sudden shift, we're in the sky following an airship that is most definitely functional. We are here introduced to our lead, Lael, and his trusty sidekick Kais, who are both hands for hire and are acting as escorts for the ship. Predictably, things go rapidly wrong after Lael complains about things being boring and massive birds turn up to fuck with the ship. Not one for inaction, Lael hastily jumps off the plane and starts shooting the birds to death in the least obnoxious of the aforementioned minigames. Cut to the deck of the airship and we see High Commander Jagran in front of one of the birds that's been transformed into the same jam as the bloke earlier. This is fascinating to a nearby photographer who exhibits roughly the same level of obnoxiousness as the minigames later on and is busy photographing Jagran. He doesn't seem best pleased with this, but before he can start murdering civilians, Lael lands on the deck of the airship, having survived the fall by using his gravity powers. Before we have a chance to breathe, however, a portal appears and a funny-looking hand flops out of it. Lael, being a massive idiot, immediately has to pull the hand out and pulls out the rest of a body with it, which Jagran helpfully identifies as a uke. The uke then proceeds to use a funny green doohickey to steal all of the ship's crystal shards. This makes Lael a bit upset and he proceeds to have his arse handed to him by the uke, who he christens Goldenrod because she's gold and has a rod on her head, and not because she's a member of the Solidago genus. As the uke makes her getaway on another sodding zoo, we learn that a ship without power doesn't fly too well and everyone runs off to the bridge, but not before Lael smarms off to the sky that he stole the doohickey with the crystals in it. It's then up to Lael to use his crystal bullshit to fly the massive airship through a canyon before smashing through a lilty monument and crashing in a memorial garden in front of the capital city. Once the dust has settled, we join Jagran and Kais in the foyer of the capital, where Jagran issues a 30 million guild bounty on Goldenrod and manages to avoid sounding evil for upwards of 20 seconds. Only after all of this does the game finally relent and show us the titles, at which point we have free roam of the city for about 5 minutes before a ferret steals our doohickey and we have to brutalise it to get it back. Thankfully, the owner of the ferret is okay with this and tells us that our doohickey is actually a crystal idol and should be returned to the crown, the source of her knowledge remaining unknown and thus making the player increasingly suspicious of her since we've already met her in conversation with Crystal Jam Man. Our conversation with her doesn't even last long enough for our Starbucks to go cold before Belle rocks up and we become a fugitive by defending her. In a sequence that could best be described as bananas, we go on the run by jumping through a window and evade capture for long enough to fall down a big hole. Thankfully, Lael survives to smarm another day, but notices that Belle has nicked his wallet and his idol, making him fully justified in leaving the smug bitch in the chasm, I should have thought. However, Lael is too put upon to do that, and the pair escape the chasm through some convenient ancient ruins. As we progress through the ruins, we learn that they belong to the Yuke civilization, which we have at some point been told disappeared because the Lilty fucked up their crystal. As if to demonstrate that things for the Yukes are pretty dire, the ruins promptly start to dissolve, leading to Lael having to rescue Belle for a second time. To show how grateful she is, she fails to mention the crystal idol she finds, and the pair carry merrily along until arriving at a dead end. This doesn't last long, however, as the floor eats Belle and Lael hastily follows, arriving in a corridor with a wall that's not very happy with him. After a brief episode of scarpering, Lael and Belle reunite and go into a big room where Goldenrod is waiting in a position she probably spent a long time choosing. Not content with simply looking awesome, the Yuke then gets Lael to take the green thingy out of his pocket, whereupon the crystal that was in it goes into the crystal in the centre of the room. Before the Yuke can explain what's going on, Kai shows up and starts throwing knives at her, and then she gets away with barely a backwards glance. After escaping the crystal chamber, we go to visit Sid at his workshop, who tells us about the steam engine he's made. Things take a turn for the worse, however, and we kill the entire Lilty army. This done, we meet Kais in the vineyard, where we find he's been screwed over by Jagran. Luckily, however, Goldenrod is nearby to drive the plot, so we chase after her until we reach the middle of a forest. Things then take a turn for the strange, and the whole forest disappears to be replaced by void. Goldenrod then summons Bahamut, and a fight ensues. Winning the fight dumps Lael and Kais into a parallel dimension, where they stay for long enough to have the Yuke tell them the creation myth again before they escape via another portal. Kais's incompetence then kicks in, and he falls in a river. Lael heroically follows to find Kais entirely unharmed at the other end. Kais gabs off about not liking the Selkie Guild where the pair washed up, and says Lael can go on without him. Not a man to leave a good man behind, Lael does exactly that and meets with the guild leader Vigali. Vigali's a bit upset since his train is powered by crystals, but the Lilty want the crystals back. He therefore asks Lael to drive the train. Lael is too much of a shirker to do work, however, and therefore tells him to talk to Sid about a steam engine. With this sorted, Lael leaves with the promise of information on Goldenrod and departs for the beach. En route, he overhears Belle, who he discovers has a crystal idol. Reaching the beach, Lael spots Belle again, only this time she's playing cards and being watched by a recurring pervert. Belle changes to go swimming, so Lael roots through her handbag before he realises that she keeps all her most important possessions in her cleavage. He therefore has to follow her and help her fail to win some sort of arse jousting competition in the most excruciating minigame that the world has ever seen. At the conclusion of this, however, we nick the idol back, so all's well that ends well. Once Belle returns from the beach and starts arguing with us over stealing something that she had no claim to anyway, someone firebombs the changing rooms. This comes to nothing, however, and we hop on the first train out of town. On the train, we run into Altair, or Ferret Girl as Lael knows her. She's full of veiled references before Lael uses his power on the train and her neck explodes, which promptly shuts her up. Unhelpfully, however, the train is stopped and Jagran shows up, ordering a search of the train. Before he leaves, however, we are shown the letter he received from Belle that threatens him with sending the picture she took on the Alexis to the Daily Mail. This aside, we then do some bullshit stealth and finally get off the train. Once on the platform, Belle smarms off at us about selling us to save her hide, and we escape her by taking a shuttle to meet Kais at the library. To our surprise, he, a Selkie, has signed up with the Lilty army. Having nothing to add on this subject, however, he gives us a letter from Sid saying that we're to go to Bridgetown. Obligingly, we go to meet Sid, who gives us a letter from Altair saying we need to meet her in Alfreteria, which is where we literally just left. After doing some walking, we meet Altair in the capital, and she tells us her father is ill, forgetting to mention that he is also the king. Lael then laughs in her face for vaguely connected reasons and goes to buy coffee. At this juncture, Jagran shows up and threatens the princess, failing to notice that the most wanted man in the country is literally 20 feet away buying coffee. Lael returns in time to have been stood up, and so he goes sulking to the station to meet Sid and Vigali having an argument with the depth of two 5-year-olds arguing over an episode of Transformers. This resolved, Lael meets Kais in the mountains to chase Goldenrod again, ending up this time at a monastery. Unhelpfully, the Yuke was wearing pilgrim's robes, and so everyone looks the same, leading to a rather retarded chase. After a few minutes of chasing, we find the cloaked pervert from earlier, who transpires to be a previous partner in Lael's firm of complete douchebags. Now with a touch more exposition, we continue looking for Goldenrod, but find only Belle, who spends a long time saying nothing before we finally move on. Eventually, we track Goldenrod down to find her engaged with Belle and Blaze in the graveyard. She cleverly hands the donkey work over to Lael, who has a fight with Blaze and beats the shit out of him. Belle then hands over the crystal idol in gratitude, just in time for Jagran to surround us with the entire Lilty army. In a surprise twist, Goldenrod saves our lives, so in gratitude we continue chasing her as she makes her escape. After a crap minigame, a cutscene saves us where Jagran arrives at a crashed airship to do some monologuing. Blaze has other ideas, however, and starts to throw fire at Jagran because he's a bit upset with him. Jagran has an interesting draw card, however, and reveals that he's a crystal bearer. OMG. His power is jamification, so he promptly preserves Blaze, jam pun, and laughs maniacally. Cut to the inside of the airship and Lael is chasing Goldenrod, whereupon the airship wakes up and the pair of them are quite surprised. They can't dwell on it, however, as Jagran shows up to nobble the pair of them. At this point we learn the crystals running everything are actually made from the Ute crystal, and so Goldenrod nicking them is actually very justifiable, at least until she uses the defense that they were taken by the oppressive force, whereupon Jagran loudly proclaims that those defeated in battle have no rights. After this piece of evil gold, Lael and Goldenrod do a runner by jumping out of the ship. After falling far enough to do some serious damage, Lael and Goldenrod awake. At this point we discover that Goldenrod can be disassembled without any major harm, and so she pulls herself together, badum-tish, and they start running in another crap minigame. Thankfully it ends quite quickly as Jagran blows up Goldenrod, who introduced herself as a Medatelian at some point during the game. Unfortunately, this superficial damage is different to the previous fall, and this one counts apparently. Kais and the Lilty army show up to detain us, but a Medatelian makes a portal and she and Lael escape into the next episode, because Christ, this is taking a long time.